Tasmania's west coast is one of the greatest historical and natural landscapes in the world. From the endemic plants, unique landscapes, and stunning wilderness to the beautiful towns deep in the valleys, the historical settlements on the rugged coasts, and the tales of steam locomotives puffing through them all. This is all capped with the Mount Lyell Railway, the first of its kind in Australia. The line runs using an Abbott system, using a rack and pinion to haul trains up the steepest grades in the country, reaching up to 1 in 16 at times. The line has thankfully been preserved and runs trains across almost the entire line. Hi, I'm Tasmanian, and this is How Tasmania Built the Impossible Railway. The Lynchford and Penghana districts were early fields in a failed Tasmanian gold rush. Miners rushed to the King and Queen valleys to find gold, but were disappointed as most gold was gone after a few weeks. However, after this fizzled out, prospectors soon came across copper. The material was sought after dearly and the mines began to boom. The Mount Lyell Company was the biggest group in this, comprising some of the richest ore lodes, and with its base in the new town of Queenstown, the company seemed set for success. In the early 1890s, the company sent out numerous survey parties to find a rail route from Queenstown to the coast. Several options were considered, including massive tunnels, but eventually the choice was made to route the line through the Grenadina Saddle, creating the steepest railway in the state. The first construction works began in December 1894 by Victorian contractors Garnsworthy and Smith, who were contracted to build the line between the small temporary settlement of Tipukana on the King River and Double Barrel Station. This first contract was £22,000. The line has several bridges and ran through incredibly isolated areas. A small 7-ton Baldwin locomotive arrived in Strawn and was ferried by barge to Tipukana to assist with construction. The largest feature on the route was the quarter-mile bridge, a huge timber bridge over the King River, which was not a quarter mile. A large construction camp was set up at Camp Spur to assist with the construction. The first section was completed in October 1895 after 9 months of work. The contractors chose to speed up measures by agreeing to build the next 2 sections from Double Barrel to Halls Creek, which was the Abbott rack system, and from Halls Creek to Lynchford. The final section from Lynchford to Queenstown was taken up by Messrs Gaffney and Harvey. Work on the Abbott tracks started shortly after access to the railhead was gained. Laying the Abbott system found inexperienced navvies slowing progress. Meanwhile, work on blasting and alignment through the challenging terrain was progressing well, and deep cuttings were being built. The deepest of these were at Grenadina and Halls Creek. The steep slopes were luckily proven to be very solid and unlikely to have landslides. An interesting function of the construction process was that many bridges were eliminated by building large embankments or deviations, much to the surprise of the company when they found out. The Abbott track had been laid by mid-1896 and earthworks on the whole line were done. 2 locomotives arrived on the line, time to help with construction. These were the 4 by Mersey Delarade Tramway Sharp Stewart locomotive and the 4 by Tasmanian Government Railways Hudswell Clark locomotive named Carbine. In July 1896, the rails were laid into Queenstown and Carbine hauled the first train into the town. After months of waiting, the first Abbott locomotive arrived in August. The locomotive was dismantled in Strawn, sent by barge to Tipukana, and reassembled at Camp Spur. Engine trials on the rack system began almost immediately, which proved a huge success. The locomotive could haul more than double a conventional train's weight up the tracks. The first furnaces in Queenstown were lit in January 1897, and on the 29th of March 1897, the line was officially opened by Marion Sticht, wife of Mount Lyell Company director Robert Sticht. The railway opened up the Lyell communities of Queenstown, Gormanston and Linda to the outside world, and helped ore from the mines reach the world markets. The railway was also the host of a West Coast icon, the Lyell picnic trains. Once a year, all miners and their families in Queenstown were invited on a picnic on the railway. Some popular sites for this were West Strawn Beach, Piccaninny Point and Upper Landing. As the railway's operations expanded, 3 Baldwin locomotives were ordered for work, while more Abbott locomotives arrived. The arrival of the second locomotive did not go so well. In 1898, it was on the steamer Grafton entering Macquarie Harbour when the ship ran aground and was lost. A replacement engine as well as the third locomotive arrived in Strahan by the end of the year. Controversy soon emerged when the company chose to extend its line to a new port at Pine Cove instead of at the existing Strahan port. The company still wanted a new port, so as a compromise they brought the line to Strahan and built a new port at Regatta Point on the opposite shore to the town centre. The 7.5-mile extension began construction in 1898 and was opened in November 1899. The largest feature was the massive iron bridge over the King River at Tipukana. The trip between Queenstown and Regatta Point took only 2 hours. This link proved crucial to developing Queenstown as the Tipukana port was unsuited to larger ships and all traffic had to be transferred at Strahan. In 1900, the Tasmanian Government Railways extended their Strahan to Zeehan Railway to Regatta Point to allow for transfers between towns. A fourth Abbott locomotive arrived in 1901 to help with increasing traffic. Between 1901 and 1903, traffic dropped because of a competing railway built by the North Mount Lyell Company sucking traffic from Gormanston and Linda. This was remedied in 1903 when the Mount Lyell Company took over operation of the North Mount Lyell Company's operations. The story of the line is for another day, but it was gradually reduced in frequency by the Mount Lyell Company until it closed in 1928. Not much happened over the next few years until 1908, when 4 new sidings opened on the line at Roaring Meg Creek, the Princess River, the King River Sawmill, and the Letty's Bay Sandpits. Traffic remained fairly steady and profits soared, mainly because of a cheap trick used by the company. Shipment and passenger costs were held high while there was no alternative, and the actual figures were fudged in budgets and reports to hide this from the government, who would have forced the tariffs to be lowered. In 1932, the Lyell Highway opened from Hobart to Queenstown, which lessened the reliance on the railway, but not by much. Demand stayed strong enough that a fifth and final Abbott locomotive was ordered and arrived in 1938. In the 1950s, increased output of pyrites at Mount Lyell caused a new jetty and belt conveyor to be constructed at Regatta Point, facilitating a slight eastward extension of the line. To help with increased loads, 2 Drury diesel locomotives arrived primarily for shunting duties on the flat line between Double Barrel and Regatta Point. 2 former Tasmanian Government Railways DS locomotives were also purchased, the ex-New Zealand stock being useful for lighter trains. Around this time, a Ruston Hornsby locomotive was also used for shunting at Regatta Point. The line had been extremely busy in the 1950s and was under significant stress from wear and tear. In 1960, a TGR DP-class rail motor was purchased for tourist travel along the line. Entering 1963, significant work was needed for the railway to survive. The investment was not coming, and the company unfortunately made the decision to use trucks instead of trains. The last official passenger train ran on the 29th of June 1963, and the last freight train on the 10th of August. The line was not dismantled, however, but was just left to rot. Over the next 2 decades, various proposals were mooted to rebuild or repurpose the rail alignment. By the 1970s, the quarter-mile bridge had collapsed, and bushfires in the 1980s had damaged many other bridges. A real threat to a redevelopment of the line came in the 1980s when the Hydroelectric Commission considered damming the King River below Double Barrel for hydroelectricity. Luckily, this did not go ahead, and the railway remained in situ till the early 1990s, when the Mount Lyell Abbott Railway Society was formed by local businessman Viv Crocker to promote the reconstruction of the line. Not long after, numerous plans, feasibility studies, and business cases were prepared until, as part of the Centenary of Federation Fund, the Commonwealth Government allocated $20 million for the reconstruction efforts. Various more studies to determine issues were conducted, and all were passed. The construction tender for a full reconstruction between Regatta Point and Queenstown was handed to Hazel Bros, and the Saunder and Ward Group were appointed to restore Abbott locomotives 1, 3, and 5. Work on a new station in Queenstown commenced in 1999, and the tracks were replaced or relaid along the route. Most bridges were replaced with metal structures, however 4 were built using historic wooden trestles. The iron bridge was repaired and the quarter-mile bridge was rebuilt. Interestingly, the Tipukana station was not restored, so the nearby siding of Lower Landing was rebuilt as a station. Honeybank was announced as the operator of the line at the time. This was to be the first corporate-operated heritage railway in Tasmania. The line was progressively opened between 2001 and 2003, with the first public services being run by leased Victorian locomotive Klondike between Queenstown and Lynchford. In 2002, Honeybank withdrew from the project, being replaced by the Federal Hotels and Resorts Consortium. The project was rebranded as the West Coast Wilderness Railway as a result of this. The first official train into Regatta Point ran in December 2002. The line was officially opened by Prime Minister John Howard in April 2003. Patronage on the line steadily increased throughout the decade until 2013, when a slight dip saw the incredibly careful Federal Hotels Group withdraw from the operations. The railway closed that year to the distress of the local community. A mass input of funds from the state and federal government saw the line partially reopened in January 2014 and fully reopened in December 2014. However, a new operator could not be found, and the railway has been operated by the Abbott Railway Ministerial Commission ever since. The railway has been kept in good condition and well maintained since, gaining an Engineering Heritage International marker in 2016, being given the high title of Tasmania's top tourist attraction of 2019. The railway has been an integral part of modern West Coast society, and despite recent challenges from weather and maintenance, has remained in its role as the largest tourist destination on the West Coast. The line has recently been closed for maintenance and is currently only operating between Lower Landing and Regatta Point, and from Rinadino to Queenstown and Lynchford. This middle section remains closed and will reopen in the future. This brings me to the end of this overview of the history of the Mount Lyell Railway in Tasmania, nowadays the West Coast Wilderness Railway. The line has always played an important role in the transport and economy of the Macquarie Harbour and Queenstown districts. If you want to learn more about the history of these towns, the region and the railway, read The Lost Province on Tasmania's West Coast by Lou Ray. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time on Tasmanian.